Hey, thank you for joining me. I am going to share a bit of history with you. Wait, please don't leave. Please don't leave. I know not everybody shares the same love of history that I do, but I'm telling you, the reason why people don't enjoy history has to do with the way it's taught. The history teachers, the history books, the history courses, it's all boring because all they care about is want you to memorize dates and places and names. They don't get to the meat. History. I'm sure you've heard the concept that truth is stranger than fiction. I mean, when you dive into what the has happened to the human condition, population, the nations, the people groups in the past, it is fascinating. Fascinating. What I want to do is I'm going to spotlight, and I've got my shirt on, and this will make some sense as I go into this, but I'm going to spotlight a country that did exist and no longer exists. Now, you've heard of Poland, okay, but Poland as we know it today is the second iteration of that nation. There was actually a Poland before that, and it merged with Lithuania to create a republic called Poland Lithuania. Um, and it is very illustrative of, because you so in the United States where I live, and I'm going to be coming from that perspective, okay. um we're very confused, like why, as far as the way that our politics are going. Things are things are happening that are very, very strange, right? Things that don't make sense to the American people. Things are being done to us apparently on our behalf that we're not actually for, right? And if you're familiar with any of my previous videos, I take a biblical view on things. One of my favorite verses, and you've heard me say this before if you're familiar with my stuff, is that there is no new thing under the sun, which is the Bible's way of basically saying that history repeats itself. Okay. I think it's possible that in regards to the United States, we have some parallels with Poland, Lithuania. Um, let's discuss those, shall we? If you see right here, Poland is in between Austria, Prussia, and Russia. And they become very. Poland, Lithuania is in between these three countries. And they become very uh, important characters, those other three countries, and what happens to Poland, Lithuania. Because Poland, Lithuania combined at a point in the past around 1360, 1380 to become a republic. Does that sound familiar? The United States in what, 1776, we usually say, but that decade of time, the 1700s or 1770s, the United States developed into a republic away from the British Empire. Um, so there's a parallel there, right? The thing that's interesting about Poland, Lithuania is they had what is referred to as a noble republic, which is to say that the nobles of the land were the decision makers on behalf of the people. They were thought, this makes some sense when you think about it on the surface, because they're the ones with skin in the game. If they own the land, they have everything to lose. So they go to Parliament or whatever they refer to that, Congress, and they make the decisions. They vote. Okay. What is interesting, though, is that the three countries surrounding them, Prussia, Russia, and Austria, were monarchs. So the kings and governments could do essentially whatever they wanted to without really having to ask the people. Poland, Lithuania, however, seemed on the surface, seemed to be beholden to the people. At least that was what was representative. That was what was said. That was the appearance. They had, I'm trying to remember what it was called. But basically it was a veto. And the veto could be by any member of the parliament or the Congress. So if there was a bill before them in regards to the welfare of the nation, all it took was one to veto it, and they shelved it. They could not pass that bill. It didn't matter what it was. It could have been good, it could have been bad. But all it took was one nobleman to say they veto it, and there was nothing that anyone could do about it. That was the way that the system worked. In the middle of this, so you combine this concept where there was some stagnation that took place because the government ground to a halt. The people's business didn't necessarily get done. And the governments surrounding it, which were not beholden to even the appearance of democracy, could essentially do whatever they wanted to. One of the things that they did do was they decided that it made a lot of sense to influence Poland-Lithuania's government. Now remember, the concept is that the noblemen, the elites of the day, were supposed to be representing the people of Poland-Lithuania. But think about this aspect. If you have property, if you have riches, how many people in our world are fine where they are? You know, they don't want any more riches. They don't want any more property, right? Very few. Human nature says there's this greed component within us, and that was in the noblemen of Poland-Lithuania. So the monarchs that surrounded Poland-Lithuania bought the noblemen. What eventually ended up happening was there was an agreement reached between Austria, Prussia, and Russia to basically divide Poland-Lithuania. Over a series of decades, the border began to shrink because the nations surrounding them simply came in, they came in, in mass and with people groups, and simultaneously with influence over the nobles. Before you knew it, what was sort of clandestinely clandestine deals that were taking place were now in the open, because parcels, regions, were just being taken over by these other countries because they were purchasing them in regards to influence from the nobles that were supposed to be representing the Polish-Lithuanian people. And before you know it, there was no more Poland-Lithuania. It was gone. It was just a border between Austria, Prussia, and Russia. And it's interesting too because I mentioned history, and how why people don't like it, and it has to do with the way it's taught and this sort of thing. I'm not a fan of the public school system. And my understanding about the way that we got our public school system is the school system that we have was modeled on the Prussian school system. And the Prussian school system, one of the bad guys, and by the way, Prussia is basically Germany. One of the bad guys in this story, the Prussian school system was created because when Prussia fought Napoleon, they lost, and they believed the Prussian German elites, they believed the reason they lost was Napoleon was able to have more soldiers because the French were stupider than the German Prussians were. And they said, our people are too smart. So we need to create an education system, a public education system, that will make them just smart enough to that they can hold a rifle and take orders and be good little boys and girls and do what they're told, but not smart enough to question the orders or look beyond what master has told them. Okay. Now, if anybody questions that, or if I've said anything wrong, I'll take corrections on that, but that's the way that I understand that it works. And that's, again, the reason, and you can see the remnants of this in our system, because what's the first grade of our educational system? Kindergarten. That is German. It means, I believe it means kid garden, child garden. So look into that. But that's kind of a side tangent point. Back to the parallels of this, just to give some interesting sort of, and I think if you've sort of understood what my point was here about the parallels with the United States, and if you look at us and you wonder what's going on, why decisions are being made in ways that don't seem to favor the American people, you get an idea of how, when it comes to history, when it comes to how things have happened in the past, why is it that it couldn't be this way now? I would suggest what we're seeing are elites in the United States are not beholden to democracy, representative government. They even say as much. They don't care about democracy. They care about the appearance of democracy. Don't challenge anything, you see, because you're not allowed to question whether something was democratically correct. You're only allowed to accept the appearance of democratically correct. You see that? Don't question when your country is being taken from you. Don't question it. And let's just dive a little bit into some things here. These guys here, the guy to what it would be my right, your left, is a guy named Pulaski, and here's the other parallel. While all this is taking place, this is when the United States is being founded. This is when the United States is fighting Britain for its independence and creating its republic. So while one republic is being destroyed, another republic is rising. So it is The parallels are uncanny. When Poland, Lithuania falls, the United States is rising at the same time. It happens at the same time in history. In fact, these two gentlemen here are Polish guys who came over and fought in the Revolutionary War on behalf of the colonies. The one guy with the mustache there is Pulaski, who is thought to have been basically the father of the American cavalry, and he actually ended up dying in the war. The guy, clean shaven there with the bigger hair, is I forget how you say his name. It's Koschosku, and he actually was an engineer and came over here and created forts in order to defend places. He actually created and designed West Point of all places. So again, the parallels are interesting. Um, so I think that's pretty much it. I think I had something else I was gonna wanting to say, but it kind of flew out of my brain, fell out of my ear. Um, but I think I think that's the main point. If you look at the past, you can see the present. If you want to, because things are cloudy. Things that are going on just don't make sense until you see them in the correct way. Like, why are things happening the way they're happening here? Because it doesn't seem to make sense. You see a nation that is more concerned with the Ukraine's welfare than they are with ours. While they don't really want us to be armed, they're actually encouraging the Ukrainians to be armed, while they're while our children are being killed in schools. They're not creating 87,000 people to go defend the schools. No, they're creating 87,000 people to use guns, to point a gun at you to take more of your money. So, does that sound like it's something that's to benefit you, the American? No. And I think that, it makes me wonder what was being said in the past. I constantly think about this, like because we only see very, very, very slightly glimpses of what happened in the past. But you can bet that there are very similar things being said. A lot of the people who are running around saying, "Oh, you don't want to be, uncosmopolitan. You don't want to be a nationalist, do you? Where you're only thinking about yourself, and what about the poor immigrants from Austria that are coming over, and what about all these things to make you the moral failure and them the sacred caregivers, when every decision they make is not in the best interest of their own family and neighbors. When they seem to constantly be supporting people who are enriching themselves, and yet they're being defended for that somehow. And you could imagine that happening over there, where the Polish and Lithuanian nobles were just engorging themselves on the riches, becoming independently wealthy, while the nation that they were in charge of, they were responsible for, faltered and fell. The borders collapsed, the culture ceased to exist in that tangible way in which it used to exist. And it's the nature of things. This American experiment, I suppose, wasn't destined to last forever. I suppose that we hoped that it would last longer than it has had. But there it is. So hopefully this is I didn't drone on too long. I hope it wasn't the boring history that maybe someone may have expected. If it was something that you enjoyed, hey, give me a comment and let me know. And hey, share, like, all that stuff everybody says at the in the videos. No, you know, people are watching like PewDiePie and stuff. Man, this isn't that bad of stuff. I need more views, guys. Come on. I ended the video and I remembered what it was that I was going to say, what I had forgotten. You ever wonder where the Pollock joke comes from? It comes from the situation that I just outlined. So when Austria, Prussia, and Russia did what they did, while they were doing it and after they did what they did, the surrounding nations and world condemned what they did, what they all saw take place. What happened was those three nations then said this to justify their actions. They said the people of Poland and Lithuania were too stupid and immoral to govern themselves, and they had to be governed. It was in their best interest. In a sense, they said they were the deplorables. That slander, that propaganda, that maligning of a whole people group stuck throughout the centuries and lives on today in jokes.